guys and girls, welcome to the No BS with Birchy podcast. I'm your host, Nikki Zhang, and this is the show unraveling the truth to the facade of the 21st century. We're now exiting the matrix and waking up to motherfucking reality. Today, we're mixing things up a little bit, and it's Nathan's 40th birthday, so happy birthday, Nathan.
Thank you, Nikki.
And today, we're unwinding the clock, and I'm going to be asking you questions and reflecting on your journey as a property investor.
Fantastic. You did a great job with the intro, Nikki. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
So I find, Nikki, I find it interesting when you just said beforehand we're unraveling the truth to the 21st century, right? Because I'm thinking back in my life and I'm like, fuck, I was born in the 20th century, right? This is a long time ago, right? 40 years is a long time. And a lot of things has happened over the last 40 years of my life. So yeah, thanks a lot for, this is fun. Thanks for the suggestion.
Thank you. Okay, are you ready for the questions?
I am ready.
Okay,
I am
wonderful.
ready.
First question. What did you expect your life to look like when you reached 40 years old?
What do I expect it to look like when I'm 40? I actually think where my life is at today is where I would have expected it to be. I had thoughts and ideas of how things should be or could be or how I wanted them to be, but I didn't have the belief because I didn't know all the missing pieces. So I had big goals, like my first goal of getting to 10 properties by the age of 30. I thought that was impossible because I hadn't seen it happen beforehand. And then when I did it, I was like, wow, that was pretty easy. So looking back when I'm at 40, I think I'm exactly where I wanted to be. The journey to get here would not have been the way I would have expected it, but I didn't know what to expect because I hadn't done it beforehand. So yeah, I look back and I look in the mirror and I'm like, shit, I've got a lot of grey hair nowadays and stuff. And it's like, there's lessons and teachings there that have obviously got me to where I am. And I think a lot of people, there's been a lot of adversity over the years. There's been lots of challenges. A lot of people think it'll just be easy, whatever. And I think that's where a lot of people fail because they give up and they don't have the toughness and the mental toughness to push through. So, yeah.
Bit of a fun fact. What's something most people don't know about you?
Well, something people don't know about me. There's lots of things, right? People think I'm a quite out there guy. I've spoken a lot about my life over the years. But yeah, there's lots of things people don't know. Probably the biggest one is I did a Channel 7 recording probably about 10 years ago, and they asked me, "Oh, Nathan, are you married?" Right? And I was like, "No," right? And they're like, "Oh, they're trying to get information out of me for TV." And I just didn't give them any answer. And people think I'm like some bloody playboy on yachts and chicks and stuff like that. But I'm a boring dad, right? I've got kids. People don't realise I've got kids and stuff. So I don't go into my private life too often, but I'm a dad. So yeah, that's probably something people don't know.
Yeah, okay.
Plural with kids. They, thems. Not like that, guys. Just, they as in multiples. Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. When you were in your 20s, what did your definition of wealth look like, and how did that change to what your definition of wealth is now?
It's a good question. My definition of wealth in my 20s, I just knew what I didn't want in my life, and what I didn't want was working 40 years in a job. There's 40 years, right? 40 years in a job doing things that I didn't want to do. And that's what I felt people were trapped in. And I felt that I saw when people back in the early 2000s or late 1990s personifying what wealth looked like. They had like a boring old white dude leaning up against a Ferrari and a yacht, and wealth is an abundance of different material possessions. It was never that for me. It was the ability not to be trapped in life. Like money and survival in life is tough, and I didn't want to have to be pressured by that. So I thought if I could sacrifice 10 years of my life from the age of, it was 12 years up until the age of 30, to be able to set myself up so I could live a life of how I wanted to. So for me at the time, it was just earning 50 grand a year was my goal, was to get 50 grand a year and I'd be free. If I had a Ferrari, I never owned a Ferrari or a Lambo. I had a few Bentleys, but different other cool cars and sports cars too. But those things never were an indication of wealth. It was more as the freedom that comes with that. So,
yeah, and being able to enjoy your family life instead of being stuck at work the whole time.
Correct. And I see so many people, like when I was younger, when I was 20, when I was 18, I was 17. I was working my first full-time job at the age of 17. And the people that I worked around, I realized that there was lots of miserable people that were 40, 50, 60 years old. And I'm like, wow, how did they get life so wrong? This isn't what life should be. And it's like that. If I could just get a plan to get myself out of my job by the age of 30, I'll do whatever I have to do. I'll live this miserable life for 10 years up until the age of 30. I'll just do whatever I have to do. And I worked 2 full-time jobs to start off with, just to build my asset base up and to get where I wanted to be. So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My next question for you, why did you choose to invest in property? And was there anything else that you were planning to invest in?
Good question. I don't know why the fascination I know where the fascination came from. My parents were in their 40s when they had me, and I was a surprise package. My brothers are in like 20 years older than me and stuff. So when I was a kid, my brothers were buying like their first house and stuff, and I saw one of them buy an investment property. We didn't come from a wealthy family at all. It was just buying a house, and I was like 13. I'm like, I want to buy a house. And I had the magazines. Like they used to, have magazine, not porno mags, property mags, right? And every real estate office, there was no internet, no realestate.com. So every week, the local real estate agents would put a magazine out. It's called a Homes Pictorial, and I'd pick up them going to the train station home from school, and I found them fascinating. And I was like 120 grand in Quakers Hill and 50 grand in Mount Druitt in Western Sydney, right? And I'm like, wow, imagine if I own 5 of them, you won't have to work. It's like, okay, I'll just work and save up that money and buy some properties. And it came from the age of 13 to 18, just working out a strategy. And it took me 5 years, but I was 18, and I think youth was on my side for that. There was no mentor, there was no podcast, there was no streaming, there was no internet, there was no realestate.com. It was like the dark ages, of having to go out there and do things. And property seemed like the right thing for me because it was physical, it was tangible. It takes people to build those assets. I look at my mum and my dad. Like, my dad died when I was like 16. So I realized that he didn't get a chance to retire. He was 62 years old. And I was like, I don't want to have to, work a life and die and not enjoy it. So it was a bit of my motivation as well. So I've always in my head gone 62 years is a time limit, right? And that doesn't get you into super time. So I had to retire myself. So my mum would say, Nathan, that area like Balmain in Sydney, right? Like Balmain's a nice area and whatever. It's very expensive. Mum's like, that rat infested shithole, right? And my mum grew up in Lane Cove, right? And that was a working class area back in the day. And so she would refer back to locations in Sydney of being bad. I'm like, hang on a second. There's areas in Sydney that sound like that today that are bad. And I was like, well, they'll regenerify. And what caused that to happen was migration, breeding, all different things that lifted those areas up. So I just went, well, we've got the demands there. We've got the needs. So property just made a good choice for me. And that's why I started buying, and I never stopped. So,
okay. Yeah. Was it hard, since you didn't grow up with much, was it hard to choose between buying your principal place of residence and investing in property? Like, how did you overcome that sort of uncertainty?
Yeah. Look, I never actually had the question of buying a house to live in, because I actually thought to myself, how can people afford a house to live in beforehand? And I'm talking like a house in Balcombe Hills for like 450 grand. I was like, how can someone ever afford a 450 grand mortgage to buy that? Average wage was like 40, 50K at the time. So for me, I thought if I bought that as an investment, it wouldn't make good sense. So I started buying properties in like Penrith and areas where the numbers stacked up at that point in Sydney. And I just thought if I bought enough assets, I would have enough cash flow coming through to support me to buy a house to live in. And I just didn't even think about a principal place. I thought I will sacrifice everything to get myself my 50 grand a year by the age of 30. And I thought it was impossible. I got there when I was like 24 in the middle of the GFC. And I had double the amount of properties I thought I could ever get by the age of 30, by the age of 24. And I just kept pushing and pushing. And I realized whenever I've bought a principal place of residence or bought a holiday house or something, for me, it's like those assets that I invested into provided that for me. It wasn't a job that could have, like no job could have got me to where I am today.
Yeah.
It's just the assets going up.
Okay, cool. Yeah. You touched on the education that was around back in the day, and obviously there's a lot more information on everywhere now.
Yeah.
How would you advise young investors to sort of cut through the BS and get to the real reliable source of information?
Yeah. It's a good question. Going back in the day, it was just my thoughts in my mind, right?
Yeah.
There was no other input. So I saw if we go back 25 years ago, in the early 2000s, late 1990s, there was a lot of these people that were like dressed up with suits with a presentation. It feels like Amway, like they come out and do a presentation and say, oh, here's what this property will do for you, whatever. And I was like, I'm not taking advice from anyone. And I just had my own advice in my head, working back strategies, reverse engineering things. And I think everyone's goal is different. Everyone's starting position is different. Someone starting out today in 2025 would be different than someone starting back out in 2002 when I was getting started, 2003 when I bought my first property. But looking at it, I think working out a plan, and like, if there's so much information out there, right? The pressures that I had back in the day is like, why buy an investment property? Why buy 10 investment properties? Why buy in Mount Druitt as a bad area? Why not buy the house to live in? There's always going to be an opinion and noise. And I think blocking out the stuff that doesn't fit in line, I just knew what I needed and what I wanted. And I remember seeing a quote once, and it said, the world stands aside for the person who knows where they're going. Yeah. And if you know where you're going, nothing's going to stop you. And I just knew what I needed to do. So I encourage everyone to work out what's their plan. Yeah. What do you need to succeed in 2025? What is your starting position? Some people, I used to see people write, oh, Birchy must have been good having rich parents, right? Yeah. Good having this. It's like, well, nothing fucking came to me easy, right? Like, I support lots of family members in my family today, not the other way around. But it's easy for people to point fingers like that. But probably the biggest thing that I had growing up was I had a roof over my head, right? And I had 3 square meals a day, and I had a bed, and I had clothes, and running water. So some people have to move out of home when they're 15 years old, and then it becomes harder because they've got different challenges of just basic survival and whatnot. So everyone's position is different, and take advice from people who have got what you want. Or are doing what you want, not people that haven't done it, haven't walked there, or haven't been able to help you on your journey. And I'd love to sit here and take credit for how great I've been on my journey. And my property investing is 100% just my thoughts and whatnot and what I buy. But the planning, the structuring, the financing of it, having a good team around you is very important. And you need to make sure the people that are around you share the same visions and values and goals that you do in your life to carry yourself there. Because if you've got people that are telling you other shit, they're just like holding you back.
Okay. Is there any specific advice or strategies that you would tell first-time investors to ignore?
I'd say to first-time investors or first-time buyer, just do what is right. Like, I see so many people, like, think about what is your life for the next few weeks, I'm going to be spending a fair bit of time just in my own thoughts thinking, shit, I've made it to 40. What does the year 50 look like for me, right? There's another decade, and who do I want to be at the age of 50, and then work backwards from that. And I think a lot of people, when they're going out, they're just like listening to what their parents have said, or listen to what their neighbor or advisor has said, or their broker has said. Don't take no for an answer would be my first thing. So looking at the feedback from other people, the only thing I would be looking at would be, where do I want to be in the next 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years? It's all good and well for your parents to say, go and buy a house in the neighborhood you grew up in that costs $1.5 million. But are they looking at the fact that in the next 10 years that you're going to be wanting to have children? Are they going to be looking at the thing that you're going to be hooked to a mortgage for $1.5 million for the next 30 years of your life? You need to have 2 people in a household working to pay that mortgage. Like, there's lots of things that aren't being considered. Yes, a broker says to you, you can borrow $1 million to go buy a property. Does that mean you should be spending $1 million to go and buy that property? What does your plan... I think the end in mind is the most important part. So for me, I'm going to look at 50. I'm going to be like, okay, well, what steps do I need to be to become that person I'll be at 50? And I think anyone, whether you're 20 starting out or you're 30 starting out or you're 50 starting out today, think of, okay, what does the future that I want to create look like? And where am I sitting at today? And what resources and what options do I have around me to safely get there? Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
How important would you say networking and building relationships is within the investing world?
Yeah, it's a good one. I think probably in the early days for me, networking was much more important than it is today. But those relationships, like that I look back over the last 20 years to say in business, for example, when I pick up a phone to an agent, I actually called an agent yesterday about a property for sale, and I'd never spoken to this agent beforehand. And it was about just a property that's near a family member's property. I was just asking a question, and the agent actually goes, I told him with the property location that he saw the surname, and he goes, "Is this Nathan Birch I'm speaking to?" And I was like, yeah, and I've never spoken to this guy over beforehand. He goes, "You've got a very good name in the industry, right?" And I was like, fuck, right, that's cool, right? So looking back, 20,000 real estate transactions, like literally 20,000 properties that we've settled for our clients and myself over the last 22 years. And sometimes when I get those deals, it's like, it's that relationship. It's how I speak to them. It's something that I did for someone back in 2008. And it's like, hey, do you remember? Oh, Birchy, yeah, okay, we'll look after you, whatever. So relationships are important. How you treat people is important. Networking and stuff like that. Yeah, like the team is important. I've got my team set up. I've built this over 22 years. So when I look at it now, I'm like, I've got a stationery cabinet with everyone there, right? But back in the old days, yes, it was getting those people. I've been fucked over so many times from bad advisors or bad people, and they're fucking me over. Some of them have been big and some of them have been small, and sometimes people would pack up their ball and go home and cry about things. But I just look at it and go, okay, that's cool. Like I cop hits every day of the week. Still at this day in my life, I cop things. I'm like, okay, cool. That's a part of the journey. Let's keep going. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone who's just started investing in property and they actually don't have any of these networks?
Research, look for the people. If you're not getting the answer that you want, I quite often just take it for granted nowadays, because I'm getting on, right? And I've been doing it for so long that it's just like, okay, that's stupid, right? Or that's good. I don't know the difference between crap or value. Just as we were hopping on this podcast, I got a text message from my team that one of my clients just bought their 8th property, right? And this broker has pulled equity out like Zinger Finance would pull out for our clients. And I'm like, fuck that dude, that broker is gold to that client. Yeah, I've never met him, got no idea, in a totally different state. But I'm like, that person to this client is very, very good. And it's 1 out of 20 or 30 people that would come with their own broker that would be able to say, yeah, that person knows what they're doing. I had someone this morning who should be at 20 properties. They're at 4, which is fantastic. But I'm like, what the clients come back to me with their finance options is absolutely terrible. So yeah, if you have clarity on your goal and you know where you need to be realistically, and the person and the people you have around you are unable to get you there, they don't have the confidence and they've never helped someone get there beforehand, you've got the wrong team around you. If I take it to business world, and like here at B.Invested, we have hundreds of staff now, and over the years, we've had lots of staff come and go. I remember one of my good mates back in the day, like professional mates, would say to me, "Birchy, you tell me everyone's a good bloke, right?" And I'd be like, "Oh yeah, but they're a good guy, right? They're a good guy, right?" And it's like, when I say someone's a good guy or good girl, right? It's like I'm justifying them, yeah? Yeah. They're not like they're a pain in the ass, there's something wrong with them, but they're a good person. It's like, I don't want someone to go, if I find myself saying, oh, they're a good person, everyone should be a good person, right? It doesn't matter about that, right? Do they have the fucking capable skill set to make something happen? And if you ever find yourself saying, oh, but they're a good person, they're the wrong person. Yeah, that's one thing I could look back today. But when I'm hiring a staff for a job, like, did they build a team to do this beforehand? Have they experienced it? Have they exposure to that? And I want the best person to be around us to do things. So there's no room to be successful to go, oh, I've got my broker who's a friend of a friend and I've got to be nice to them. No, if they can't get you there, sack them, get a new one, right?
Yeah.
So if you're not getting the answer you need, and I always tell people when they're working with us, if we can't help you, go find someone that gets you to where you want to be.
Yeah.
But I won't give up on you. And I know how to get someone there, right? I may not be able to do lots of things in life, but I know how to build a cool portfolio. That's why we built so many of them. So yeah, just look for that team. If there's a roadblock, okay, you're not the person to get me there. Who can get me there? And go looking. Yeah. So,
okay, cool. Yeah, I feel like that's a struggle with a lot of new investors, that there's so much saturation in the market that it's hard to find which company sort of aligns with your goals and which one's going to get you there across the finish line.
Yeah. Hey, like the world of social media today, right? Like I've seen, I had this guy who worked for me, right? Not mentioning names to him, right? People know he's a ripoff, right? He's a copycat, right?
Yeah.
And this guy, he came to me. I had a wallet. A good mate of mine, Daniel bought me a wallet, Louis Vuitton wallet, right? And I don't go to Louis Vuitton and stuff, but, I do have some of their products.
Yeah.
He bought me this wallet, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, maybe 15 years ago. And it was a cool wallet. And anyway, I still got that wallet today sitting around, so I don't use a wallet per se now. But it's perfectly fine, right? It's perfectly fine. And this guy who works for me, who's building a large portfolio, he's got like 100 properties. He's in the media quite often now. And he just copies everything, right? He copied a certain thing. And looking back, he came in with a wallet one day, right?
Yeah.
And the wallet looked identical to mine, but it was from Parkley Markets, right?
Yeah.
And 2 weeks later, right, Linda, he was working with Linda. He was like Linda's assistant and stuff in the office. And the wallet, I looked at it again and it all frayed, right? It fell apart, right? So you can copy and knock something off to make it look like something.
Yeah.
But the value of that Louis Vuitton wallet that I didn't even buy, a mate bought it for me, was like, that wallet is value. It's good value. So when you're looking through a world of social media, right, there's so many cool people out there. Like the 90s had it too, right? And you'd have the dude that was next to the Lambo or the Rolls Royce or something, and people will buy into that going, oh, he must be successful. Could have been rented, who knows, right? But you can quite quickly see, just like testing a wallet, the quality of it by the questions you ask the people that you're dealing with. So you want to be making sure that all your answers can be answered from the team that you have around you. And if they can't answer those questions with clarity, and for you to have basic common sense of, okay, yeah, that's sure, I can see how I'm going to get there, then they're probably not the right people for you.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important. Like 10 years ago, 16 years ago when I started B.Invested, there was no such thing as a buyer's agent.
Yeah.
And people would say, a buyer's agent, I've got to pay you for buying a property. I can just find it myself. Or go and be my guest. Go and find your own property, right? Now when I say B.Invested, we're a buyer's agent, people are like, oh yeah, cool, you're a buyer's agent too. How much do you guys charge? So it's good that there's a lot of an industry that we've left in the rear vision mirror that we've seen grow around us. But 99% of them don't own 10 properties, 20 properties, 50 properties, 100 properties.
Exactly.
So if they haven't been able to do it for themselves, well, how can they do it for you, right? Because otherwise they'd be doing it for themselves. Right?
Exactly. They don't have the results.
Correct. So you want to make sure, I used to listen to rap songs a lot, and I like Dr. Dre, right? And Eazy-E. And they had the thing about studio gangsters, right? And I always refer to people as studio gangsters, right? If they know how to talk like a gangster, but they've never pulled a trigger, right? How do they know how to work the streets? So if you are talking about theoretical sort of scenarios, but you haven't built the wealth yourself, then how can you, they're just studio gangsters. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. You need someone who's been through the journey and they know all the highs and lows of the entire investing journey.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. To get to where my portfolio's at, it's fucking not easy. Hey?
No.
To get where most of my clients' portfolios are at, 10, 20, 30 properties, it's not easy. Yeah. And the level of intellect of the teams that we've got, whether it be lawyers or property managers or situations people fall themselves into. Another call I had today, property managers guy, he's got 6 properties, and he's bringing 2 properties to us that weren't managed with us. We weren't in the location at the time. And the real estate agent goes, yeah, I've heard of these Blink property company. They just put the rents up. This tenant's a lovely tenant, right? And you want to take care of this tenant.
Yeah.
And he spent 2 air conditioners on 2 of the properties that they manage, and they're pro tenant. I'm like,
oh yeah.
So yeah, the to get through any of those challenges that you'd have, that guy, his property is probably $80 and $50 below market rent. That's costing him $130 a week out of his pocket, that he's losing. That's like $7,000 a year that he's losing from a wrong advisor on his team. So, there's times when things get tough. There's times when you need those resources, and if you don't have someone that's capable in your corner, then it's not, you're not on the right track to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, so, exactly.
Yeah.
Cool. My next question for you: how do you think young investors should prepare themselves for the challenges and opportunities within the market for the next 5 to 10 years?
It's a good question. What your parents did, what all our parents did, isn't what's going to work good for our generation, because the generations change, and the world is a different place to what it was 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. And so listening to times gone by, there's lots of good nuggets that are in there, and things that you can reflect on and try and picture yourself from a story from an uncle, an auntie, a granny, a mum or dad or whoever. But that's a different world. That time's come and gone. So you need to be thinking, ahead of what's Australia going to look like? What's the financial market going to look like? What's finance in general going to look like? What's lending going to look like? So capturing all those things into play, and having a plan that's bulletproof to get you where you want to be. If you want to buy a house to live in, like I was filming a podcast a whiteboard session the other day on how to pay off a mortgage in 5 to 10 years, right? Most people think you buy $1 million house, you got to go and spend the next 30 years paying that mortgage at, $1,200, $1,600 a week. That's boring. It's not going to work. You could have another strategy that could be that you buy 5 little shitbox properties for $200,000 a piece. They double, you sell off 5, pay out the mortgage on your house, you got it debt free. So being more creative, being more strategic with the moves. Investment's very important. It's not just let's go and buy a house for $20,000 and $50,000 and we'll be right. It's a different world. So have a strategy is the most crucial part. And is buying the house to live in the most viable option, or could it be that you're renting a property and that you go and buy a house that's more financially savvy for you to do, and you become a rent investor? That's not something that 9 out of 10 of our parents or grandparents would be thinking about doing, because the property wasn't treated as a financial instrument beforehand. So I think that's what a lot of people, including me, who's someone who wants to get into investing, because properties are obviously getting so expensive, I think it's so hard to imagine one day buying your principal place of residence if you're just going to keep buying these investment properties. Like, it's like, will I ever get there? I'll tell you a funny story. Like, I've had 3 principal place of residences now. I've shared this beforehand, but I might just go through it. I've never told you personally, and it's good just for refresher for people. The traditional ways, you go buy a house, $1 million, whatever, work hard, pay it off. I just build up my assets. And I remember once I had all these newspapers, right? And I've still got them somewhere around my house, and they're in boxes, and they're of me of the front page, Donald Trump of Australia, right back when people thought he was cool, like back in 2010, whatever. And I remember once there was this newspaper and said this guy's got 150 properties, and I was moving into my house for the first time, my principal place, or moving out of it, wherever it was, like moving into a place, and I was like, shit, this is the first time I've bought a house to live in. I've got 100 properties, but I don't have a house to live in. I'm moving into my first time, and I realized that my tenants. When I bought that house, it was a 1.2 million purchase. I sold my first house that I ever bought, took the profit, and used that profit as deposit for the house. It was just more for a science experiment to say, hey, I didn't use my money to buy it. And I wasn't emotionally attached to the house that I sold. They were just numbers. And then I put up rents on about 30 of my properties to get about $800-900 a week worth of extra cash flow. And with that cash flow, I use that to pay in service for the debt for my house that I was living in. So my tenants basically paid for me to live in the house I wanted to be. Then my second one, I used, I couldn't get a deposit at the time. I was just going through a tough patch, but I saw that there was going to be a big boom. And I just bought this property and I did a vendor finance of the 20% deposit. And I used a property I owned outright as collateral, and I got them to give a mortgage against it. And, that was how I got into that deal. And that property I bought for $2.2 million, would be worth now possibly $10+ million, and it was only over 6-7 years. But if I didn't have that title deed that I could just throw like a bang, I'll go make it happen, I wouldn't have been able to do that. The place I live in today, I remember when I bought it, I just bought like 20-30 motels, and I was like, shit, I'm broke as fuck, right? I was like, I nearly broke myself buying 30 motels in Corona. It was so stressful. I pushed it, I got there, and it's cool. But when I bought this house, I was sitting there going, shit, how am I going to afford it? And then I just went and sold a bulk deal I bought back in 2012. This was in 2022, I bought the last place. I paid $4 million for it. Just think about $4 million house. If you had to pay on that 50 grand a year, that's 80 years of paying 50 grand just to pay it. That's without interest. That's without eating, food, nothing, right? So I sold off a property I bought for $330K. I sold it for 1.2. I only owed 200 grand on it. So I had $1 million. There's my first $1 million. 25% of the house is covered. And then I had some other properties I bought for 150, 200 grand. I sold them for 500-600 grand. And it hurt me to sell those properties, and they've gone up a bit on top of that. So is the house I live in today. But then I'm like, I look at it and I'm like, I never stepped foot in those properties. They're just a vehicle. It's like having a $50 note or a $100 note. They're just options and choices. So for me to get through my life, no second job would have saved me to get to my houses that I've lived in. I've got beach houses and stuff as well that I spend a lot of time at. But for me to be able to do that, it's been the assets that I've had, understanding how money works and currency works, understanding the pressures of the system that are surrounding us. One thing I did not understand when I first started buying property, I just thought houses go up in property in value, rents go up in value. That's what I've got to go buy. And I use the word house because I'm taking myself back to the 18-year-old version. Yep. I say property today, And I look at it and I didn't understand the full extent of money, and that's why I spend a lot of time. I'm the only person out there in the property space that 100% gets how quantitative easing works and how the monetary policy works and how it all ties back through. People sometimes think I'm a bit autistic because I look at things very, everyone's laughing in this room right now, right? Some people mistake it for me being like, fuck, Birchy's on a bag of Coke or something, right? But it's like, I'm just a bit wild, right? But I'm geeky like that. And I think for me to be able to share value, I go on a lot of tangents about money, system, inflation, because that is where it's at. Like
exactly.
That's the secret source that no one gets. So,
So I see a lot of my friends and families, they all have obviously very different amounts of money saved.
Yeah.
What would be the difference between advice you're giving to someone with 50K and say 150K? How would you map out their strategy for them?
Yeah, good question. So I think when you break it down, right, like, because we're based in Sydney here, and the average price, like, let's say one of your mates wants to buy a house today, how much would they be spending on a house or a unit or something to live in? if you had to guess?
I'd say they would probably have around like 80K saved up.
But how much would they be buying the property for? Like, would it be $1 million, 800 grand, $2 million? What would
Probably just below $1 million.
$1 million? Okay. This is what $1 million looks like, right? $1 million is 20 years of saving 50 grand. That's the start of it, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot to pay off. $1 million is also, at a 6% interest rate, 60 grand a year, $1,200 a week. So if you bought a property for $1 million today, you'd be on the hook for 60 grand a year after tax to pay. That's a lot of money to pay. So if I was starting out again, I'd be like, shit, the bank told me I can borrow $1 million, but is that the best move that I could be making today? You go to the bank and the bank says, yep, there's $1 million, and you go back and say, I want to buy an investment property later. Well, no, your income doesn't support that. You're locked out. But you could take that 50K and use it as a 20% deposit or a 10% deposit on like a 200 to 500 grand property, depending if you always try and guide people more towards the 20% deposit, so a smaller price. It works better. But 200 grand to 500 grand property, get something that's below market value, like I always talk about. I would be doing the same strategy that I did 22 years ago when I bought my first property today in 2024. I wouldn't be buying a property in Mount Druitt. I wouldn't be focusing on a house. If you could find a house that fits in the budget, great. If you could find something in Mount Druitt for 200 grand, let me know. I'll pay you a fee to go and make it happen, right? But there's markets out there that I didn't have access to back in 2003 when I bought my first property. I didn't have the internet to see what's happening in Perth. I didn't have the internet to see what's happening in Townsville, Darwin, Melbourne, Adelaide. And there's lots of markets out there. And if you can find yourself a property that's going to fit in line with that goal that you need, I'd be working towards that. So with 50 grand, you could buy one property. With 150 grand, you could buy 3 properties today. If I had 50, I'd start with the first one. If I had 150, I'd buy 3 of them. Yeah, you could take the 150 grand, go and buy that little unit to live in for $1 million, have a 900 grand mortgage, as a ball and chain around your ankle, and then, work for the next 30 years to pay it off. Or you could have 3 tenants. Let's say you spent 150 grand as 3 deposits at 50 grand a piece, and you bought 3 properties at 250 grand a piece, right? You'd have a loan of, say, 600 grand across 3 properties, so your debt would be much lower, but then you'd have 3 lots of tenants going out to work each week to earn the money to pay you. So if they're paying $400 a week rent, you've got 400, there's $1,200 a week, there's 60 grand a year in income. You've got people paying your debt for you. So the first option is that you spend $1 million, you hook to that debt, you got to pay 60 grand a year yourself, or you've got a debt that's significantly less, like only 2/3 the amount, but you got 3 sets of tenants, 3 sets of diversification, 3 sets of markers, buying properties that are below market value. You could buy 3, pull out equity, go buy another 3 quite quickly. That would make a far greater impact in my view. Get your finances right. I always said, I'd witnessed people when I was younger that were parents with kids, and they had to work a second job and they had to do certain things, right? They didn't have control over their life. And I always said I wouldn't have kids until I could look after myself. And I think no matter what, you shouldn't do anything until you can look after yourself financially, because being trapped to a job and having to work and earn money isn't the best way to earn money, right? Like someone earns 50 grand, 100 grand a year, 200 grand a year. There's literally people in a room that are going, oh, okay, let's just create another $1 trillion today, bang, right? And if you really break down what $1 trillion looks like compared to 100 grand a year, it's just, they're just destroying your value of your life. And I think get yourself financially set at a young age.
That's crucial. A good advice. Would you say for the person who can afford the 3 properties, would you tell them to diversify?
Diversify how?
Like buy in different states and different areas? Or just whatever they can afford?
Whatever the numbers stack up to be. If I said to you, here's 150 grand, right? Do you want it in $5 notes, $10 notes, $20 notes, $50 notes, $100 notes? Most people say I want the $100 notes, right? But if no one had change out there, right, and you wanted to go buy a can of Coke and here's your $100, well, then you're illiquid, right? You don't get any change for your $100.
Yeah.
If you have $5 notes, $1 coins, you're more liquid. So looking at the whole picture, it doesn't really matter. The properties are just there to serve a purpose.
Yeah.
Whether they're diversified in different markets, as long as those numbers stack up, is the most crucial part.
Yeah, okay.
I wouldn't, like if you had 3, I wouldn't say let's go buy them all in the same suburb or same region, because that does bring risk. So if it happens to be 2 in one location and 1 somewhere else, okay. If you can find 3 in 3 different locations, great. I've seen people that have just bought in a certain location and the market hasn't moved for 5 years and all these other areas had moved.
Yeah.
And it's like, you missed out, right? Like you could have had more options and choices. So, yeah.
So you talk a lot about emotionally investing and investing logically. How did you build up the mental discipline to sort of differentiate the two?
Yeah, look, there's been so many times over the last 22 years as an investor where I'm like, fuck, I didn't sign up for this, right? There's been bad days, like bad things that happen. But if you have strategies in place, you put protection measures in place, and you look at it and go, okay, well, I remember once I was driving, I had someone in the car, it was a business thing, right? It was totally away from property. And it was in perspective. And I had about 10 high pressure phone calls within 10 minutes whilst I was driving. And I was trying to enjoy a nice sunny afternoon on a Friday afternoon. It was about 4 o'clock. It was like 3:45 and 4 o'clock I had some deadlines. And I just hung up the phone. I had someone, it was an older gentleman in my car. And I said, fuck, I just wish I didn't have to deal with this right now, right? Like it was just annoying, right? And I said, I didn't sign up for this, right? I didn't sign up for this in my life. And he goes, oh, well, you could go and get a job at the RTA and work for Service New South Wales, right? No offense to anyone that works at Service New South Wales, right? And then as soon as he said that, I was like, fuck, right? I was like, whew. It all came in perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because, it's a little bit of pressure for that, but the alternative was a lot worse, right? My conversations at 4 o'clock on a Friday afternoon would be like, oh, I'm going to chuck an RDO and, we're going to go and get pissed on the weekend, whatever. It would be a different conversation. And I always put in perspective of me taking this action and whatever the pain that comes from it. It's like going to the gym, right? No growth comes from being without adversity, right? Like you won't have gains without a bit of pain. And throughout the journey, there's things that you can get hurt by, but if you can minimize it as much as you can, you take out 9 out of 10 of the problems. And then when something does arise, it's like, okay, well, it's in perspective, it's relative. And I think some people might go, oh, Nathan's smart or he's done this, whatever. I wouldn't say I'm smart. I would say I'm committed. Yeah. And emotional intelligence is much more important than intellect when it comes to investing. And I've seen very smart people with, very high IQs that fuck up investing tremendously, whilst people that you'd be like, how did that person get there, right? Says the guy that got like 32% in his UAI or ATAR or whatever you want to call it today, right? But it's a commitment, and it's like having a logical mind. When something, I've looked at everything I do logically. Emotion gets you killed in life. My mum, she's lovely, right? My mum, she's lovely. She's the best mum I could ever want, right? But if my mum was in the business telling you guys what to do or whatever in the business, it would be a very different sort of thing, right? And the logical bit would be like, the emotional part is like, oh, I'd love to work with my mum, right?
Yeah.
But then the logical part's like, no, I need the best people to do that job, right? And that's, not my mum. My mum's a good mum. So it's like people do these decisions in life because they had emotion, whether it be something their spouse has said, whether it be something their friends have told them, whether it be something that they are in a really tight corner, right? There's been so many times where I feel at the time that I've had a gun in my mouth, right? Go, fuck, give me all your money, right? It's like times where I need to pay a deposit, there's times where I need to settle a property, there's times where massive bills come, right? There's been times where 7-8 figures worth of bills have come in a day, and it's like, fuck, that's like tremendously bad. Yeah. But it's like most people go, oh, well, the easy way out is to just do this, right? There's so many easy, quick win fixes out there, and people go for them. Sticking it through, being logical, having a clear plan, and always reverting back to that plan is important. So, yeah, that's what keeps me sane at night.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
As long as the numbers stack up.
The numbers stack up. It's a logical game we're playing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Emotion loses in relationships, right? You see so many people, I don't know if you ever see it on like your Facebook, I don't even know if you're on Facebook, right? People, you see, I'm in a relationship and bang, 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 and they're putting all this stuff up, and the next minute it's like, it's terrible, right?
Yeah.
And that's because people are going into relationships that, are very emotional based, right? It's like logical. And I think all decisions in your life, people try and crack me for emotional sort of answers on things. And it's like, oh wow, like occasionally people be like, Nathan said something nice. I didn't think he had that in him, right?
Yeah.
But logic is crucial. And
Okay. How would you overcome the fear of the long-term commitment that comes with investing? So, for example, if you're afraid that you can't make mortgage repayments at some point in your life, how would you sort of overcome that?
Have a buffer will be the easiest one. Have a buffer. People don't realize what buffers they've got for a mortgage, for example, right? A mortgage, you think I've got to have 10 grand in the account or 50 grand or 100 grand, whatever keeps you happy. I see people with no buffer, right? And they're comfortable. But you could have equity in your property, right? You'd be like, people go, I've got to sell a property, I don't have a buffer. It's like, no, what about you just pull out 50 grand equity, park it aside, don't spend it, don't go do dumb shit, don't use your emotion to go, I'm going to buy a Lambo today, right?
Yeah.
Leave it in there, and if something goes wrong, that's your get out of jail card. Instead of having to sell, people don't plan, right? We've seen a time where it's just gone by with high interest rates and whatnot, and people have sold properties out in the world, right? Instead of selling the properties, if before the interest rates went up, they had have planned and gone, hey, cheap interest rates, let's structure our debt right, let's pull out some equity, put in an offset, that would have been better. So you're just being very diligent with the moves that are being made. Yeah.
Okay. What is the biggest mistake that you made early on in your investment journey that you wish you would have avoided?
That's a good one. I've never had a deal where I'm like, hey, I blew my fingers off. Hey?
Yeah.
There's never been a deal. There's been times where I'm looking back in the rear vision mirror and I think opportunity cost, which had slid past. But there was never really a deal. A lot of it was my opinions.
Yeah.
So opinions, getting back to the emotion thing, the opinions, I don't like that. I feel this. This is what's in my head, whatever, right? That won't go up in value. Units are no good, right? And so many times when I look back, the decisions that I didn't make are the ones that I regret. I've never had a deal which I've bought and I sold it for less. There's a point when I wanted to be a hero and I went and bought like 200,000 square meters of land in Sydney, and I own them still to this day. And they probably negative collectively by $500,000 a year. But they've gone up tens of millions of dollars. But at the same time, I could have just went and bought little shitties with, high cash flow, and they would have gone up as well. But I had high cash flow that I could direct into those properties at the time. So, I look back, some decisions could have locked me in a little bit. But it's a learning game, hey? And this year, I'm going to do a podcast. I'm going to film a podcast today as well after this about just some deals I've been buying this year. And, the deals that I buy this year are the same as the deals that I bought back 22 years ago, numbers-wise. Sub 200 grand, little shit box, because that's what I need on my journey today. And, I've never had a deal that's blown up on me. There's lots of things I could have learnt sooner. I didn't know how equity worked to start off with. I had no idea, right? Just like everyone going, equity, why do you want to get in debt? You want to pay out that loan, right? They're all emotional things. They're all knowledge gaps that I didn't have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you did that you thought was a big mistake, but actually ended up being a blessing in disguise?
No. Like the decisions that I've bought were based on very logical calculations.
Yeah.
So I've never got into a deal thinking I've made a mistake. There's things where I've definitely over pushed myself. Times when, if we talk about the Matrix, back in the show, the Matrix, a lot of people don't watch the Matrix, right? But the Matrix is, there's the machines attacking the ship where he's plugged into the system, right? there's been times where I've come very close to getting an arm ripped off me or a leg ripped off on this journey because I've pushed myself too hard. Every problem I've ever had on my investing journey has been self-inflicted from pushing myself too hard. There's one. There's something no one knew. Something I didn't even know until I just vocalized it, right? Every pain I've had has been from self-inflicted, So,
okay. Yeah. And how do you know when to stop? How do you know your limit?
I don't.
You don't.
I just keep pushing, right? I keep pushing. If the numbers stack up, the deals work and they make your life better.
Yeah.
And I always say to people, here's another bit of gold that I'm pulling from like 20 years ago out of my head, right? If the numbers, when you're investing, you're wanting the assets to improve your life, not to take away.
Yeah.
So every time I'm making a decision, I'm wanting to make sure that's going to get me to the next step of my journey and improving my life, not taking me further away. So I'm very diligent when making those logical decisions as to, hey, this is the right move I need to make at the time. So,
Okay.
And I say that very confidently, not as cockiness, because as I was saying, I was like, it sounds pretty cocky, right? But there's a saying, like, you only move when it's time to say, you only speak when it's time to say checkmate. And it's like, when I make that move, it might look very bang, right? But it's like, it's very thought out from looking at what I need on the next level of my journey.
Yeah.
Same thing I take with my investors on their journeys. So,
what do you want to achieve by the time that you're 50 in your investing journey and in your personal life?
That's a good question, right? It's a good question because I haven't taken the time to sit there and plan exactly every step for the next decade of my life. I did say when I was 40, when I was 30, that by the age of 40, I want to be a billionaire. I remember filming that in my Nissan R35 GTR. At the time, I had a hypercolor jumper on that I was wearing. And that was my goal, to be a billionaire by the age of 30. I'm not there by the age of 40. I'm not there yet. I'm well on my way there. When I first started out buying properties, I didn't know how to get to 10 properties by 30. And I thought it was impossible, but I did everything I could to get there. And I did that. And when I said that when I was 30, I was like, I didn't know every little bit and piece in between. I'm a quarter of the way there, a third of the way there, which is cool. And I think I might be maybe 42, 43 by the time I get to that level, which is cool. But I don't even look at the money anymore because the money is irrelevant and worthless. Are we talking just property? Are we talking about other financial instruments that I invest in and businesses and whatnot? There's lots of variables. I see the next decade, me just being that typical, when they say that Monopoly dude or the old dude with white hair that's like, this lucky old rich dude, right? Like everyone talks about those baby boomers today, they're lucky or whatever. I see when I'm 50 being at the top of my game still, and I see lots of things that I want to achieve in the business space of what we do. So many things that I'm not at liberty to talk about because I just, I'm conscious of intellectual property and stuff that we do while we do it. And from a property front, I would expect my portfolio to be in the thousands, right? Whether it's, 10,000 would be a nice figure to be looking at. How to get there, I believe I've perfected certain blueprints on how to get there. And time will tell when we look back in another 10 years at 2035. Wow, that's a long time, right? But I think the best days lay ahead of me. And it's been a cool journey, but I think there's a lot more cool stuff that I need to grow into as well. And we're always growing. I've never felt like I've hit a level and it's like, that's it. It's like, there's shit we need to grow into. So
that's amazing.
Thanks, Nikki. Any more questions for me today?
My final question, if you never got into property, what would you be doing now?
If I never got into property, what would I be doing now? I've got no idea, right? It's kind of like that sliding doors show, right? Like, what would the life take you to? I grew up in a family where we had a fish shop, right? We had like an aquarium, and I always thought if I could everyone has a pet, right? Everyone's got pets in their houses, and I thought I want to build a business which has like pets in, like, the cats and dogs are not my thing, right? Fish, I know lots of things about fish, not like Deuce Bigelow, right? But kind of, the fish shop and the aquarium, right? And I I was going to do stuff with fish was one thing. And the other thing was, because I was a geek when I was at school, I had no friends. I had very minimal friends. I wanted to be in IT, right? And IT was very different. Tech was different space back then. So I wanted to do something in IT. And I just never did anything with that. But property was my most passionate thing. And that's why I chose a path in that. And the business, I never thought of the business until many years later. And that's probably one of the proudest things that I have is a business, not just a property front, because like I used to trade shares back in the GFC, and I remember I'd go buy shares and I'd sell them and I'd make some money, or something would happen, they'd go down a bit, and I'd be outside smoking like cigarettes, because I used to love smoking. I don't smoke for like the last 7 years. And it was a very boring life trading shares. And when I was buying property, it was a very boring thing as well, because I didn't have like anyone I could talk to. And when I first started the business, it was a different time. It was a different world. I was a different person. And I enjoy the fact of the lives that we've touched and the stories that we've got that people share, and the results and the impact that we have on people's lives. And I wouldn't see myself doing something different than what I do, but I'm very proud of the business, the community, and the path that we've created. 22 years ago, when I first started buying property, there was never an article in the newspaper that said this person's got 10 properties or 5 properties. It was never a thing. And I think I was the first person out there doing that. There's lots of people out there that have done it now. Take great pride in the fact of seeing them being able to do that and following the strategy. That's something I'm really excited about. But if I was to do something different, it might have been around IT, may have been around the family business stuff. But I've really broken the mold with what I do in my own family.
Definitely, yeah. Well, you've really built a legacy in like the property game, and definitely made a difference in many people's lives.
Thank you for all of you guys that have trusted and had confidence in what we do over the last 16 years in the business, and supported me on my journey as well. And I think the best is to come. I'm excited for the future. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you for answering my questions. I definitely learned a lot, and happy 40th birthday again.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I feel like an old man. So yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks, team. Catch up soon.
Like Bilal said, man, we stuck in the matrix. This my advice, don't care if you take